Welcome to Let Me Know How It Is, a pop culture podcast about animation, TV, movies, comics, and more. First, I want to thank all of our listeners for sticking with us as our schedule has not been as regular as it once was. But with life and work outside of the podcast, we've had to dial things back a little bit. Currently, we're aiming for a release schedule where we put out a new episode every other week. This week, however, we're bringing back another classic episode for you all. It's end of summer and back to school time, which always makes me feel a little nostalgic for my younger days. So for the classic episode this week, we're bringing back our episode titled Kids on Bikes, where we explore the nostalgia-filled subgenre of action-adventure movies and shows where ragtag kids have to step up and save the day. So enjoy, and as always, thanks for listening. Welcome to Let Me Know How It Is, a pop culture podcast about TV, movies, comics, and all things geek. This episode, we are talking about Kids on Bikes, that subgenre of adventure films that exploded in the 1980s and are going just as strong once again today. We'll dive into some of our favorite examples to try and figure out why we loved them then, and why are they still resonating with audiences so much now. I hope you enjoy the conversation. I'm Clifton.
This is Tommy Smithereens.
And I'm Frank Melman.
All right, this episode is inspired by the fact that it is once again Stranger Things time, but we will not be focusing on Stranger Things or talking spoilers for the latest season or anything like that. So in case you are not up to date on that show, this episode will still be safe. I know that not everyone stayed up until 3 a.m. on Thursday night, Friday morning to watch a new episode, even though they had to be at work at 7 a.m. that same morning, like I may or may not have done.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, I'm guilty.
Yeah.
I didn't do it that night, but I definitely did it Friday. Got to see the sun come up on Saturday morning.
Nice. Yeah. Not everybody's in that position,
No.
so we will take that into consideration and not spoil anything up to date on the show. But we might refer to some broad concepts from Stranger Things based on earlier seasons, just as we talk about this genre of films. So first thing I will say is that I was absolutely obsessed with these movies when I was a kid.
Yes.
Like if you gave me any movie that was a ragtag group of kids versus the world / monsters / aliens / commies / whatever, like I was 100% in, no questions asked, like right from the start.
I have a theory about that, but go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we'll get into, because I mean, I definitely want to answer the question of like, why did we love these things so much? And I assume I'm not alone in that.
No.
So, I mean, did you all like them just as much as I did?
Yes. Unfortunately, yes. Even more so,
Yeah, same here. I watch a ton of those too.
Yeah.
I was always good with the idea of, like you said, a group of kids, going up against something that was definitely not thought of as kid stuff.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And or, like you said, going against, monsters or the world or whatever. So,
Right.
Yep. Always on board for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for me, it was a kind of interesting moment for me because I had an older brother that's 4 years my senior, and he got a bike. And when he got a bike, I mean, 4 years is nothing when you're older, but when you're a kid, oh my God, those 4 years is just, it could be, the span of a lifespan,
It's immense.
Oh, yeah. You can't imagine what life is going to be like in 4 years from that.
Yes. Well, he self-taught himself how to ride a bike. And we would tag along, me and my younger brother, to wherever he went. And this joker went everywhere. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rock Creek, but he damn near biked everywhere on that bike on the Rock Creek Trail, which is insane at his age.
And for those not in the area, Rock Creek Park is a park that runs like all through Washington, D.C. and suburbs.
Yes.
That park is probably 30 miles long. It's like a 30-mile long, narrow park that just runs through all over this area.
Yes. So his 8-year-old to my 4-year-old was just crazy, basically, for me to be tagging along while he's on the bike. But we thought so highly of him because he got everyone on the bike. It seemed like the world was open to him when he was on the bike. So much that he taught me how to ride a bike. And how he taught me was the worst thing you could imagine. He taught me how to ride a bike on a hill.
Oh.
Yeah, and it was a bike with no handle brakes. So after the fourth attempt, the second one almost crashed into a metal fence. But the fourth attempt, I got it. And from that point on, it was like, oh my God, the world is opening up to me.
Right.
So that's how I felt when I was on the bike. So, and it was captured, I thought, by all the movies I saw, because every time I saw a kid on a bike,
Yes.
oh my God, the world was open to him, you know?
No, I had very, very similar thoughts where I was like, when you're a kid, like that bike represents freedom to you.
Yes.
It represents like freedom and opportunities. And thinking of these movies, like that's what it captures. Like it gives these kids agency in these movies at the time of being their vehicle for, you know, fighting establishments or fighting invaders or whatever they're fighting this time. Like it's definitely like the source of their powers is that freedom and that mobility and that agency to go out there and do things on your own. And we're of a generation where, I mean, it was different then. And I don't know how it is now. I don't have kids. I mean, you, Frank, have a young child,
Right.
and Tommy, your kids are a bit older. So I don't know what it was like with either of them, but I mean, do you imagine that, like the world that they're growing up in and grew up in being like the amount of freedom we had to do that type of stuff?
No,
I don't.
I don't. Yeah.
No. What I was gonna say was, for me, I remember there was like when I got started riding a bike and had my bike, and it was just the idea of, and it's more so like when you get a car, but again, as a kid, when you have that bike and the idea of like, well, I have no idea. My parents have never driven down this street before in my own neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm going to check out what's in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yes,
And it's something small, but
exactly
it's like to a kid, it's this idea of opening up your, the world around you gets that much bigger. But no, I don't foresee, I just don't, part of it is where I live is a pretty busy thoroughfare.
Mhm.
I mean, granted, when I think about where I lived, I had the same thing where I lived in South Texas. There was the main drag of like my town was, within 2 to 3 blocks of bike distance. Right.
Right.
And I very rarely, but that's, other than that's where like it was right in the corner of where I lived was the 7-Eleven, so that's like Slurpees and comic books. And then there's also the Pizza Hut was right there. So that meant like sit down Miss Pac-Man or sit down whatever video game they had, or
Right.
if they had a stand-up game. So I spent some time there. And then when we moved to another part of the town, you could bike through the back, like through our back of our house to another convenience store that they had in Texas called the Maverick Market. And that was a place that had like an immense magazine section, spinner rack. And it was like, again, for a kid that, that loved comics, it was really great. But it was also great across the main drag. So you had to be careful with your bike of like, that was one of the first places I'm like, okay, I'm crossing this main thoroughfare at like 13 by myself, and again, as a kid, that's a huge thing because, your parents are not, you're on your own basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that freedom is something that definitely, is it's enormous when you're that age.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. I saw, this is a little while back, but I saw Zelda Williams on Twitter tweet that she had seen younger audiences watching Stranger Things and saying that they thought it was unrealistic. And the reason that they cited Stranger Things being unrealistic was because they said there's no way kids would be allowed to just wander around unattended without parents as much as they do in that show.
Right.
And I think like everyone of a certain generation just laughed out loud like Tommy just did.
Yes.
Just at the thought of that.
Yeah.
And because it wasn't like, that is what it was.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, summer break, like I was gone as soon as I woke up.
Yes.
And like, I mean, I was miles away,
Right.
Yes.
like at a creek or in the woods
Yes.
or something.
Yes.
And then like by dark, I'd come back.
Yeah, you come
most
back
of the
home.
time.
Yeah. Yeah. You just
Yeah.
knew you had to be back by nightfall. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember, vividly playing around like a friend of mine from school, and she and I would go and hang out, and we would hang out around the drainage ditch.
Yeah.
Like like any one of us could have, gotten, taken a spill at the bottom of a drainage ditch, and no one,
Oh yeah.
no one would have. I mean, we'd have cell phones.
No
It's
one
like,
would have known.
good luck finding a payphone out there. It's nuts.
Yeah.
When I think about some of the places I was as a kid, where I'm like, no, I just, yeah. I mean, again, when I think of Stranger Things, I'm like, oh no, that was how it is. There was, I mean,
Yep.
and again, in my hometown, South Texas, they didn't get an actual comic shop proper comic shop for like I had to be almost 15. So you're talking from the time I started really collecting to like 12 or 13 to about 15 is 3 year span. So when they finally got one, my parents, my mom and my dad were pretty good about taking me regularly to get regular comics, every Wednesday or Friday, depending on when they came out. But there was a couple times where like they were busy or they had, something going on with my sister and they couldn't take me. So I would bike there, and it was, it was practically the other side of town.
Yes.
So you're talking miles away, and then trying to negotiate like a full bag of comics. Like, if I slung it on my backpack, it's moving around as I'm trying to bike. And it was, again, one of the thoughts of like, I don't think I would ever do, it's amazing to me that I did it because of how far away it was. But again, it doesn't, Stranger Things never has ever felt like anything other than like, yeah, that's how it was.
Yeah. No,
Right.
It felt authentic to me too. Yeah.
Yeah. Like calling and telling your parents you'll be at someone else's house for dinner and that's not where you're going. And then they call and tell their parents they're going to be at your house for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Like stuff like that happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's funny you bring up the drainage ditch because it'd be anything that was a mystery, whether it be an old house, a drainage ditch, hell, even a cave, man. It didn't matter where it was. If it was some sort of mysterious thing to it, you get your friends together to investigate the situation to see what the heck's going on, man. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think to me, those movies captured the curiosity of kids during that time, along with how parents were always just busy. I mean,
right.
I mean, both my parents worked, so it wasn't like they had time to watch me. And if they had the same hours people do now, from 8 to 5, they came in tired, and then I was either lucky to get McDonald's or they cooked dinner, and they cooked dinner. They added extra 2 hours to them being busy. It was roaming the streets was the norm.
But the thing about it was also like, and again, I know you guys have talked about like Craig of the Creek and stuff, and I haven't watched it yet. But like, I know in my old hometown, there were tales of the schoolyard, tales in the playground of like, well, that person like that house that burned down because someone was practicing witchcraft there.
Yeah.
Yes, or that's the town. That was like I know like downtown in my hometown, that was there was a particular bar that you could solicit. that I knew about as a kid. Like it was talked about as a it made
it onto the playground.
Well, it was. I mean, again, you're like 13 or 14, and people were like, oh, you're gonna go see.
Such.
You're gonna go see so and so, and I was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, right.
Yeah.
Again, it was one of those things where, again, as a kid, you have no idea what they're talking about, but you play the game of like, oh, I know, and like, no, I didn't know. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But like, there was all sorts of stories I remember around my hometown of like, the urban legend stuff of like, the devil at the dance. You know that one?
No,
I don't know that one.
That one is one of like it's like a story about a girl a very vain woman goes to this dance, meets a handsome gentleman, clock strikes midnight type of thing, and then it turns out that the guy has goat legs, like he's actually the devil.
Okay.
Jeez.
Yeah, and that was like one of those like, and people were like, oh yeah, it happened like at that dance hall over there, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah. They'll make fun. Yeah, they'll make fun. Yeah.
But where that would be like the thing of like, yeah, that's that kind of stuff. Those kind of stories, like I had those in my hometown all over the place. Okay. It was like,
yeah.
But as a kid, no one would be brave enough to like go check out, those things, but we would talk about it and pedal around and do stuff.
Mm-hmm. No, every day was an adventure, especially if you had a bike.
Yeah.
Just open up.
Right.
In fact, like if in some cases, if you knew somebody else with a bike, you use their bike to go get them, or if there's one of you that didn't have a bike, guess what? You're hanging on the back of that bike.
Yeah.
While the other person
standing
pedals
on the back wheel.
Yeah. All that stuff. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Trying to compensate for that weight.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
But that's another thing from the movies, like what you got at, Tommy, of like your mysteries, like the child sense of mystery. Like kids don't know what's going on. Like everything can become a haunted story to them. Every house, like every empty house can become a haunted house.
Yes.
That those movies really play into that by presenting. I mean, I'm thinking like, let's talk about Goonies for a second.
Okay.
And Goonies is the premise is that, these kids are not the upper class kids. They're the average kids. They're kind of the outcast kids who just want to save their neighborhood because developers are buying it out. And then they get wind that there could be pirate treasure under their town. and all of a sudden the mystery is on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think seeing another reason like why I resonate, like why I connected with these movies so much, is that I would often see kids like that were like me. Like I wasn't rich, like I was, middle class, and I knew I was middle class because I knew like the rich kids in my class who had all the toys, and I didn't. So I was like, I was aware of like class differences even as a kid, just in that context. And you see like they present people that look like us, that are, in the same situation as us, that all of a sudden now their neighborhood is hiding all these secrets. And you think like, oh, like it's not hard for your mind to start imagining that in your neighborhood too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what, like that sense of magic, I think, just spread out from those movies into me, like that they would fuel like all my adventures around the neighborhood too, where I was just like, I wonder if there's pirate treasure like down this creek in my neighborhood, because there were Spanish doubloons or whatever in their Oregon, in their Oregon town.
Yes.
One-Eyed Willie's treasure.
So now that sense of imagination and hope and wonderment, it just feels, I think it felt every kid at that time, just thinking that you're part of something bigger or be able to help your family in ways that they couldn't possibly do. Like that, I mean, with Goonies, it's just the imagination, the belief that you were right in believing in something no one else could, or everybody, or how adults would tell you, you don't know nothing, you're a kid, you prove them wrong by doing something they would never imagine doing. It just, that kind of wonderment always filled you with the mysteries of what you would know around your town, or even that story. But I never knew about that dance story. It's just my head.
No, that story, yeah. No, but that's like similarly along those lines. Like again, when you think about, there's money in my town, or there was across the street from us, there was a couple that didn't live there very long because the guy got into trouble. When the reason he got into trouble was, he had three other people tried to rob a bank in Matamoros, Mexico, and they were busted. But it was all over the news, and it was like our neighbors, and it was a huge story. And the guy was like, before, like, and I had talked to him maybe a handful of times with my parents, and he was like, "Oh, you like comic books? Let me show you." And he had all these early Flash stories, like early Barry Allen Flash stories. That was the first place I ever saw those issues was there. And then it turns out the guy went on to try to rob a bank, and it failed. But there was talk that there was either money in the house or money somewhere in a storage unit within our town.
Right.
Okay.
So again, it was one of those things of like, a rumor, it's rumor, it's small town rumor stuff. But at the same time, but the other thing that I thought more about it was, and I think I've talked about it before, is like, Joe R. Lansdale does a lot of small town noir stuff, but a lot of times it's bent with supernatural stuff, right?
Okay.
Like it can be as simple as people are terrible, people are monsters, but no, sometimes full on, no, monsters are there too.
Right.
And I think, when I think about, these kids on bike stuff, so I was like, he does it more, it's more adult opposed to kids, but I definitely like when I have the same tug or pull towards that stuff when I'm thinking about the genre.
Yeah. Like the blending of like real horrors with imagined horrors.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Or like, remember the season, Tommy, of Fargo with Chris Rock?
Uh-huh.
Where it's very much the idea of like, there's actual horrific gangster stuff going on. And then at the same time, we get we as an audience member see some of the supernatural stuff as well.
Yes.
That kind of thing of like, no, it's like, there's stuff that you see, and then there's a world like beneath it or up to the side of it that not everyone gets to be privy to. So
yeah, and you hope they catch a glimpse of both, but from the eyes of a child, both have seemed beyond your reach, whether it's real crime or monsters or anything like that. In fact, that reminds me of that one movie, Monster Squad.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
In which they stumble upon that while the whole town doesn't believe what's actually occurring. They're the ones to uncover the belief of what that is, which it stems from that as well. Yeah.
I mean, and that was one of my favorites around the time it came out, for sure. Shane Black, correct? Shane Black wrote that?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, premise of that one is that Dracula is coming back to life in your town, and this group of kids is the only ones who knows or believes it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And he's bringing Wolfman and Frankenstein and who else with him.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I loved that one as a kid. I loved it. Again, I mean, it's got the ragtag group of kids that are archetypical of a lot of these.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, kind of the like Goonies, like the outcast group. And that is something that I've noticed in common in a lot of them. So, I mean, that's probably something I responded to as well.
Right.
just because like I saw mine and my friends as like, you know, not the popular kids, but also like we were just kind of doing our thing.
Right.
And another one that like I really, really liked is Explorers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a
really
good one too.
And that one, I do know who directed that one because it was Joe Dante and written by Eric Luke, but starred Ethan Hawke, River Phoenix, and Jason Presson. And River Phoenix, oddly enough, who's known as the heartthrob later in life before his tragic ending. But he was the nerd in Explorers. He played Wolfgang, who was like the nerdy science kid in Explorers, and Ethan Hawke is like just the average kid. And then their other friend, whose the character's name is Derek, is like the troubled home life, which is also a common thing that comes up, is that often, at least one of the kids will have trouble at home in the group.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, and that one, I mean, it's a kids on bike movie for the first half, and then it takes a turn.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
That movie takes such a hard turn.
Yes, it does.
But I mean, I loved it just because again, it's the possibilities that it presents of like, you've got these three kids on bikes. You got they're just, traveling their neighborhood. They've got a dream that they're a vision of sorts that they're seeing of this, turns out to be like a circuit board is what they determine. And following this vision they have, the smart kid played by River Phoenix builds it.
Yeah.
Like actually constructs this circuit board, this computer piece. And then it gets them a magic force field. Like all of a sudden they've got this force field bubble they can control.
Right.
And then they make, of course, the logical leap that any kid would make of like, let's build us a ship and ride this thing around.
Yeah.
Made perfect sense to me.
Of course.
Yeah.
I loved it. And then that's when it goes off the rails in the movie, and I still loved every second of it after. But they're no longer kids in bikes, they're kids in space.
Yes.
Still.
Yes.
And meet some very unexpected aliens. But yeah, no, that's one that I loved as well. What are some examples that you can think of that had the stuff we talked about?
I always loved the one that I always loved, and they're a little past being like kids because it's got a little bit of the teenager stuff in it. But
yeah, I mean, kids in bikes is kind of a loose nomer too for this whole group, because a lot of times it's often kids and it's often preteens and it's often teens. So it's just kind of a catch-all phrase to cover like child through teens.
Yeah, I always love the Lost Boys.
Yeah,
I forgot about the Lost Boys. No, you're 100% correct. They are with bikes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Lost Boys is great because it's got the whole fish out of water thing and trying to fit in and trying to find your place. And then, you kind of lose in touch with your older brother who's being seduced by, turn into a vampire.
Right.
Vampire.
Yeah.
I like the illusion. And I think it's one of the first places I've ever heard of it was the idea of, the Lost Boys and Peter Pan being somewhat, vampiric. That was always a cool illusion, I thought.
A little nefarious.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. But, you never grow. The tagline of the poster being, sleep all. Was it party all night, sleep all day, never grow old? Something along those lines. But yeah, I was, it's everybody in it's great.
Yeah,
it's the Coreys and Jason Patrick, right?
And
then
Kiefer Sutherland,
Kiefer Sutherland,
Alex Winter,
Jamie Gertz,
from Bill and Ted,
Jamie Gertz, you're right. That was so star-studded. Yeah, I forgot.
Bernard Hughes was a grandpa.
Who was the mom?
What's her name? I can see her. From Parenthood.
Yes, I can't think of her name at all. I'm sorry.
Diane Wiest.
Thank you, Diane Wiest. Yes,
she was great in everything. Yeah, she's awesome in that too. But no, just that and the fact that the twist in it's nice. Isn't that and who directed that? That was
Joel Schumacher.
Joel Schumacher, right?
Yes,
yeah.
It's a great movie. I love that one.
Yeah.
Love the Lost Boys.
Classic.
Yeah, it's a really, really good one. But that was when I was thinking about putting stuff together for this. That was when I thought, oh yeah, the Lost Boys.
I can't believe I forgot about that one. I can see the whole thing, but to me, unfortunately, the iconic one that comes to mind with me is always and will be the Goonies. It's just that it's how it starts out, and I can still hear Cyndi Lauper singing in my ear when they, you know what I'm saying?
Good enough.
Yes,
they're good enough.
It just echoes every time I see a bunch of kids on a bike, even when it's not Cyndi Lauper playing. Like you could put that to Cyndi Lauper right now,
right
now. Yeah.
Even to this day,
To this day, it's just made for it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Goonies is for sure like the quintessential one,
Mhm.
I'd say, of that era. I mean, you got some, like, again, when we talk about kids on bikes, um, I don't know when I first became aware of this, like, as a phrase, as like a catch-all phrase for movies.
Mhm.
I do know it was at least by 2016 because I remember when I first saw like advertisements for Stranger Things, and I mean just like a image, like a title card
Mhm.
on Twitter or something that was like Netflix's new show. And I was excited for it just because I don't know. I was like, I've always been captivated by this idea. Like I said, I was obsessed with these things.
Right.
And so I do remember describing to people when they would say like, what's Stranger Things? I'd be like, oh, it's Netflix's new Kids on Bikes show.
Mhm.
So I was aware of it as a phrase by then, and looking it up, like I do see the phrase being used on Google and stuff around 2016, but usually right after Stranger Things launch, where people are referring to it as the resurgence of it. So I don't know when I became aware of it as a phrase, but a lot of times it does get classified as like a subgenre of sci-fi specifically.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
A lot of people will think that, and it is a lot of the times, but it's not all of the times. Like Goonies is fantasy, but it's not sci-fi per se.
Yeah.
Like there's no magic creatures in it. It's just pirate fantasy.
Pirate fantasy. Yeah.
And there are some others that don't quite fit in there. Like BMX Bandits, I
Yeah.
know counts
Yes.
as like a Kids on Bikes movie. Literally, it's in the
Yes.
title, BMX Bandits.
I don't know that movie at all.
Oh, it came out 83. That's the crazy part. It came out right after the quintessential one, which is E.T., which is
Right.
crazy.
Yeah, E.T. of
Mhm.
course
Yeah,
too.
and it
Yeah.
precedes Goonies. That even makes even more part of the
Yeah,
the
it is kind of
conversation.
an omission that we didn't mention E.T. yet
Mhm.
because that literally is kids flying on the air on bikes.
Yes.
That kind of is where it all came from, probably.
Probably. Well, actually, when researching this, or at least looking for different sources, I came across NPR brought the subject up in 2016, in which one of their speakers, or the people behind the mic, was talking about how it was really introduced with A Wrinkle in Time helped create the Kids on Bikes.
I could see that.
Oh, like the novel,
I could see
Yeah,
that.
and
Yeah.
original novel. Yeah.
Well, for me,
Yeah.
I've never read A Wrinkle in Time. Don't have a heart attack.
Okay.
but
No.
but they were mentioning that in the October Country, which I've never read.
I don't know that
In
one.
which
Yeah, I don't know that one.
it's brought up in the sci-fi sense of what you were saying earlier, Clifton, of how it was that sci-fi / fantasy in which kids dealt into a greater mystery, and how they got around and able to do so were on bikes. So
Yeah.
at least that's when they thought it came about. Who knows as specifically as to how?
Right.
But the first
Yeah.
time I can recount it was with E.T. That's the
Yeah.
first time I can recall that actually being a thing. But I thought it was just, a story about kids. I didn't think it'd be I didn't think it'd be a subgenre, because to
Right.
me what made the subgenre is it expands upon then not only being sci-fi, it also, to me, it delved into stuff like everyday life. Like regardless of
Right.
that, what's the other movie? Stand By Me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
which there's no sci-fi with that. It's just
Right.
kids just wandering about. Half of it they're mostly walking, but initially they're definitely on bikes as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just going back to BMX Bandits for a second,
Mhm.
yeah, it was similar to that. Like it's a crime. It's like a crime movie. Like these Nicole Kidman and these kids on bikes solve like a crime thing.
Mhm.
So it's not fantasy, but it's very much like, the bikes are their agency to be crime fighters in a way.
Okay.
in Australia. And then Stand By Me is another similar one, falls into that. Gleaming the Cube, strangely, which I've brought up before, oddly enough, on this podcast.
Yeah.
Which is 1989. It's not a bike, it's a skateboard.
Okay.
But it's a similar thing where it's Christian Slater and his skateboard taking on organized crime and criminals and a mob who killed his brother.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
And when I was a skater kid and hungry for anything skateboarding,
Mhm.
like I was in the theater to see that movie. I probably own it somewhere. I probably have a VHS of it somewhere here still, oddly enough. But yeah, I mean, in that one, it's a skateboard. So it doesn't have to always be bikes. But yeah, just that like the kids on their own versus something much, much bigger than them without adult help or supervision.
Mhm.
Or occasionally there is adult help or supervision, but it's usually in the form of like an outcast adult
Okay.
Like it's somebody that the kids wouldn't look at as a normal adult type figure, often case. I can think of some examples of that, but I mean, some of the other ones that are, I mean, not necessarily sci-fi, not necessarily fantasy in a way, or like Red Dawn, I thought of,
Yeah, definitely Red Dawn,
where they're fighting a communist invasion of this small town, middle America, and they're all that stands in their way of and is protecting freedom from this,
right.
Evil empire. And I loved that one when I was a kid. I mean, it was still the Cold War when this came out,
Right.
and even children of the 80s, like, I mean, we were the tail end of the Cold War, but still somehow got hit by it. Like we still got hit by it. And we're into it. But yeah, like, I mean, it's just kids and their wits fighting unnamed communists.
Yes.
I guess in that one.
Right. No, that's a good one. I was thinking though, like what, when I think about the genre itself or the subgenre of itself, how much do you think, like, just because of the fact that, like, I was a latchkey kid,
right,
and the fact that I had so much, Tommy mentioned earlier, just having so much, unsupervised free time that led to being out and doing stuff so much. And that's what I think about. Is it a reflection of that time? That's why those movies came about? Because, I mean, I don't know how much people would want to watch my exploits as a kid, as opposed to, like, I'm not fighting, I'm not looking for pirate gold. I'm not trying to,
right.
I'm not trying to, figure out if the devil of the dance happened at this particular dance hall. I'm not involved in that, but these kids are.
Right. You're not yelling Wolverines while you shoot a rocket launcher.
No, definitely not.
No, you're not. Yeah.
I'm not trying to scavenge food or get in with a really cool tank driver or, none of that stuff from Red Dawn. But again, what I said earlier, I had my theory as to why you were drawn to these, you specifically, Clifton. And I think a lot of it does get back to Scooby-Doo.
The mysteries.
Right. And the idea of,
I was a huge Scooby-Doo fan.
You are, and were, and you've mentioned it before, and I think, when I think about all those Saturday morning shows that I absorbed, that it was like, whether it was, Scooby-Doo or, Captain Caveman or Speed Buggy or any of that stuff, or Josie and the Pussycats, any of that stuff. It was always them fighting against something that was, beyond their thing. And then sometimes they weren't, the kids weren't, like you said, weren't believed, or it was, something they weren't supposed to be into, but they were solving the crime or solving the mystery, or, and I think a lot of that comes from that. But again, as Tommy was saying, where it all comes from with A Wrinkle in Time, going back to my childhood, A Wrinkle in Time, and then what's the second book? Is the second book either a swiftly tilting planet, or it's like it was a trilogy at one point, but I can't remember. But we had those, like, as a kid, we had like, as part of our day of school, we, like, in the private school that I went to, we had stuff read to us, and that was one of the novels, or the series that we read was those 3 books. Okay. So I could definitely see it coming from there. But again, I don't know if it was, I kind of thought, I didn't realize it till now, like what Tommy was saying, that it was just, kids on bikes, that's how they got around. So therefore.
Yeah. Right. Like, why would there be anything genre like to it?
Right.
It's just what life was.
Right.
I just did a quick search. Wrinkle in Time, A Wind in the Door,
there it is.
A Swiftly Tilting Planet
there it is
the third one. And then there were actually 2 more, Many Waters and An Acceptable Time.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Might have to check those last 2 out.
Yeah. It looks like one of them was 1989. So some of them were much later than the others.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And you had mentioned latchkey, and that is probably part of it too. Like, again, where I would see myself in these kids, because I was a latchkey as well. And I think, I mean, like you, like me, you, Frank, Tommy, we were part of, I mean, what I feel like was probably the first and possibly the last true latchkey generation.
Yeah.
And I mean, kids who were raised in the, mid to late 70s through the 80s and possibly into the very early 90s, I think are of that generation that didn't exist before or after, because I think economics had changed to the point in the 70s where, you didn't have a stay-at-home mom all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
You had more single moms working, who had to be at work, and their kids would come home from school, or two parents having to work to sustain a household.
Yep.
And yeah, and that was just an economic change that had happened. And then somehow in the 90s, I think is when like some of that changed again. Because I don't remember my friends when I was in high school. I don't remember my friends' younger siblings being latchkey kids like I had been just a few years earlier. I feel like there was more of what we have now, of just like there's more oversight now. Like kids aren't out there wandering miles away on their bikes.
Yeah.
And I feel like that changed pretty soon after us. I mean, I'm sure it still exists some, but as widespread as it was, because for me, I mean, it was literally like in my neighborhood, all of us were. Right. All of the kids were. And we'd all come home, get off the bus and go somewhere that wasn't home and just mess around down by the creek, in the woods, something, and just be on our own. And I think, I think that probably was a part of our resonating with these adventures we were seeing of like, it could be us.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
This could be
Yeah,
us.
sure.
Yeah. But also too, I like that. I didn't even think about it. Bikes are much cheaper then than they are now.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, when I looked at prices, especially during the time we were at home a lot, I was considering getting a bike, and then I saw how much a bike costs. Like a bike for an adult, that is not cheap. Oh my gosh, and it shocked me because I remember them being so much cheaper than this. Because why did every kid in the neighborhood have one?
Well, but I remember as a kid that, I mean, one, you could roll into Toys R Us and get a bike.
Yes.
Right? Relatively cheap bike. I had a cheap bike for forever, and then my parents got some old, some better bikes, and they didn't ride them as much, so I inherited and rode around those bikes. And you're talking about handbrake stuff. That was the kind of bike, I graduated from a kid's bike to that. But one, I remember during like the afternoon block of whatever I was watching, like there used to be bike commercials for kids.
Yes, you're right. You're 100%.
There was like a BMX. I remember vaguely like the voiceover or something along the lines of, it's a BMX bike and it's the metal used in is the same metal they use in spacecrafts. It was designed to be like really attractive to a kid of like, well, that's really cool. And and of course the visual is some kid on a bike doing like amazing tricks. And for all I know, it's a professional adult that happened to be short doing all these tricks.
Yeah. Right. Oh, but it made me remember a movie that Clifton brought up. Remember Rad? We didn't mention Rad.
Oh yeah.
When you said the tricks, I was like, wait a minute.
Right.
That's what all that was about, was the biking competition and how amazing it could be to be on a bike and do tricks like that. That thing was sick. Yeah.
We just went in depth more into that one in our sports movies, because it is a very unconventional sports movie for its time.
Very unconventional.
But I loved it.
Yeah. Also, I mean, a more recent one, obviously I didn't watch this as a kid, but the current version of It.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up in relation to the older version of it too.
I've only seen bits and pieces of the original one. I think I was a little too young for it, or it was one of those moments of, I tried to watch and my parents were like, nah, I don't think so. And then I definitely watched the current It. I loved the current It. I thought it was amazingly well done. I thought it was really, really good.
Okay.
And again, what I love about It is the idea that it's one of the few ones we see that, I mean, sure, I'm there's talk of a Goonies reboot. I keep hearing talk of it, or not a reboot, but a revisiting. Right. But what I love about It is the fact that you have Pennywise terrorizing them as children, and then they grow up, and then there's still the kid fear stuff that's going on, but it's not like, you rarely get to see that outside of like comic books. Comic books do that stuff all the time. But I'm like saying in other works of fiction or sci-fi or horror, you don't always get to revisit characters as much as you do in something like that.
Right.
And again, it's one of those that when I think about like Stranger Things, it's one of those like, oh, okay, this is definitely a through line for me from It to that. Right.
Right. Oh yeah, of course. And I mean, I'll just go back to the 1990 It, just while we're still talking about some of the older ones from that. Cause it was like, I feel like it was a very touchstone movie for a lot of TV miniseries. It was a 2-part TV miniseries in 1990 starring Tim Curry?
Tim Curry was
Tim Curry as Pennywise.
Right. And then isn't wasn't John Ritter in it? Am I thinking?
Yeah, as the
Was
adults.
John Ritter?
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
you get John Ritter and Annette O'Toole, who I had seen from Superman stuff because she was Lana Lang in Superman 3, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, it was, and I grew up on Three's Company reruns.
Sure.
So I knew John Ritter, of course.
Right.
I didn't get to watch a lot of the horror movies, like the examples of these in the 80s, just because like we didn't watch horror movies in my family. And somehow the 1990 It on TV, because it was on TV as an ABC Sunday night movie or Monday night miniseries, snuck through. And I was actually at a friend's house when it started. But yeah, that one I think traumatized a lot of kids. A lot of kids, because it snuck through the cracks for a lot of people that didn't watch horror like it did for me.
Right.
And in the first part of that, especially, it's very similar to like 2017. They broke it up into the two parts, where the first part focuses on the 30 years ago as kids, and the second part focuses on them as adults. And that first part, the 1990s series, is terrifying. Like I haven't watched it in a while, but I remember that being like the scariest thing I had seen probably to that point in my life. And I mean, it didn't scare me away because then I went and read the book.
Oh, wow.
I got out of the library like not long after that. Way too young to have read that book.
Yeah.
But I did. And so it definitely intrigued me. But yeah, like there's just like the Tim Curry's just scary in general.
Right.
Really. Like I love him. I love him, but like there's something creepy about him. And like you put him in like a clown makeup with sharp teeth and it's now gone to the next level. Like that is just terrifying. And yeah, I mean, everything about that, like it's just kids being imperiled.
Yes.
One after another nonstop. And then you get to them as adults. And this is actually a theme Stephen King hits on a lot. And is that the trauma and horror of childhood like still haunts adults.
Right.
He does it. It's quite literal in the sense of it, where they're still being haunted by the same thing 30 years later again. Literally the same monster. But I mean, it's just that allegorical sense of like the horrors you face stick with you. That is just basically the theme of a lot of this stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's a great example of it.
Yeah.
And
Trauma stays.
I recommend both versions. Like if you like the 2017, I do recommend going back to the 90 just to be like, oh, like maybe this is quaint, or maybe like, oh no, like this still holds up and is actually kind of harrowing.
Right.
This is actually kind of scary.
Okay.
But just for me seeing like, fun loving Jack Tripper being so haunted was a horror in and of itself in that one.
Yeah. Like I said, I vaguely remember, like, I remember it was a miniseries, and miniseries were a big deal in those days. Again, we talked about the idea of, you missed stuff in those days, you missed it,
Right.
There was no DVR, there was no streaming. It was either you sat at home or you VCR'd, you recorded it on the VCR, or that was it.
Yeah.
But no, I've never gone back to revisit, and I really liked the 2017. I thought both of them were really, really good. So I'll check it out.
Yeah, I liked both versions quite a bit.
Okay.
Me, I don't like horror. I'm not visiting.
I-
I'm fully
You're not bringing
aware.
any horror to this game.
Nope. I'm fully aware that trauma lingers. Nope.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yep.
I've come across many of people who are still scared of clowns at my age. So I've seen firsthand what the effect of it did to a generation of people. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Tim Curry, man, he's terrifying.
Oh, indeed. He knows how to either make you laugh or make you scared. Ooh.
One I thought about that I'm bringing up, and I just want to see what reaction we get out of it. That it was it's a bike movie. It's not really necessarily a kid on bike movie, but it's. I know what you're gonna say.
I know what you're gonna say.
What am I gonna say?
Can I? Oh, you sure you want me to say it?
Sure, go ahead.
Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Of course, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. It's a man-child. It's a man-child kid on a bike going to find his bike movie.
Oh, definitely.
Yes. He is a very naif character. He's a very childlike character.
Very much so. But when I was just thinking of ones that I'm like, what about Pee-wee's Big Adventure? It absolutely is. The whole time.
Definitely is. 100%. Yeah, he's a man child who loves his bike. Yeah, if that's not a bike movie, yeah.
Yeah. You know, there's even the stuff with Dottie where he like turns her down and rebuffs her because no, you know, I'm a loner, I'm a rebel. I got to get my bike. You know,
Yes.
you know, all that stuff is in there. I mean, I love it when I remember seeing it. I remember seeing it in the theater when I was a kid and loving it, and then revisiting and like this still holds up. This is still really funny stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
But again, it's all, you know, it's about him being, you know, looking for his bike and being on his bike, and yeah.
Yeah, as a kid, that made sense to me. I was, he just looking for his bike. Yeah.
Right. He wants to
Do
get
what
his
you gotta
bike.
do,
Of
man.
course.
Yeah.
Why
You
not?
can relate to that.
Yes.
Oh, indeed. At that age, oh my God. I was like, man, I'd be mad as anything. Somebody steal my bike.
Yeah, Francis.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. But no, looking that up. Yeah, I looked at it. I was like, that definitely is a kid's movie. But
Yeah, right.
But what kills me is what else is a kids movie that I'm surprised that you didn't bring up. I mean, Kids on Bikes is Karate Kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, when they beat him up,
Yes.
chase him down on their bikes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was horrifying when they caught up to. I like, he's not gonna get away.
No.
They're on bikes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And there's a scene where he just picks up the scene where he picks up his bike in frustration and just throws it in the dumpster.
In the dumpster.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But no, oh my gosh, the mere mention of showing of bikes in certain, like, if you have a kid in the 80s, I don't know how it is, but they always connect them to a bike. Always.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I had to recall Jumanji's a bike movie. A Kids
Is
on a
it?
Bike.
Yeah.
Because
I haven't
the
seen
house
that
they
in forever.
pick. Remember the house they pick, they get to there on bikes
Right.
to do
Okay.
the kids. I can't think of the guy's name. That ends up becoming Rob Williams' character. They bike to
Right,
the house
yeah.
from the and then that's when they play the game in the attic.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's all flooding back, man. It's just a whole lot of kids on bikes, man. But I never seen the Sandlot. Kids on bikes?
I think so.
I mean, yeah, it is. This is where it kind of bleeds into like sports movies or unconventional sports
Okay,
movies.
okay.
Because they're not so much facing like the big adventure movie menace. It's
No.
kind of like rad. They're facing
Isn't kind of
milder stuff.
kind of coming
yeah.
of age kind of stuff.
Yeah, kind
Okay.
of coming of age,
Okay.
kind of day in the life a
Okay.
little bit.
Okay.
I mean, definitely on bikes. It definitely revolves around like that freedom of youth at that time.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to transition to get into a little bit more of the modern takes on this in a second. But before that, I just wanted to remind you, if you're enjoying the show, you can check out all of our past episodes on our website, letmeknowhowitis.com, as well as anywhere you find podcasts. Just please, if you enjoy the show and feel so inclined, give us a like or subscribe and leave us a review. It really helps us out. Finally, if you want to suggest a topic, send it our way by email at info@letmeknowhowitis.com, or we'd love to hear from you on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is our show's initials at LMKHII. So you'd mentioned 2017 which like we were posing a couple questions. One is like, why did we love these movies when we were kids? Which I think we've hit on some of those reasons along the way. And the other thing we were going to hit on is like, why are they still resonating so much now?
Yes.
With audiences, that there's been such a resurgence, and in the 2017 it is part of that for sure.
Okay.
But I mean, you can cite Stranger Things as being the impetus for a lot of it, and it was. I think Stranger Things is what really cemented in studio execs' minds that okay, yeah, there's market for this. These things can happen again. But I think there was a hunger for it even before Stranger Things, and Stranger Things just hit at exactly the right time.
It did.
To like sate that hunger. Because you did get a couple before it that were really trying to hit that itch. And one is Super 8, the J.J. Abrams.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm about to say, yeah. That's one definitely that fits it. Yes.
I can't remember what year that was exactly.
2011.
Was it 2011?
2011.
I was thinking it was 2011.
Yes. Yeah, it is 2011.
I didn't. Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't finish watching it because that movie moves so slow for me. So slow at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I liked Super 8 at the time it came out, but it was not a perfect film to me by any means. There were things I really appreciate about it. Just, you know, as someone obsessed with the genre that they were trying to to reintroduce, that they were trying to re-energize or revisit. And a lot of it works. A lot of it does work. Elle Fanning, she's a great, strong presence in it, very much like Drew Barrymore in E.T. is a great, strong presence. Like Elle Fanning is, I mean, kind of as memorable in the movie as that almost to me. She's definitely a standout performance in Super 8. It's a very, like, it's not even a major role. It's just like you look at this kid and be like, yeah, this kid knows what she's doing. Like, this kid's got skills.
Yeah.
Like, you can just sense it from watching it, even though it's not a major role or anything. But, I mean, Super 8 was good. Like, it's definitely Abrams trying to recapture, like, the magic of Spielberg. He's trying to, like, pay homage to E.T. Most obviously.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
Ooh, there's another movie that came out that year, too. But
okay, I'm interested to see if you say the same one I'm about to say.
Okay, all right. I mean, let me go first.
Yeah.
Okay, Attack the Block.
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Because when he said that, Boyega's breakout role was that.
It was.
In which that's what got him notoriety as Attack the Block with Nick Frost.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, huh. It's ironic that you would say that. And that movie came out the same year. And to me, it has that iconic. And it's the one that's the only thing of kids on bike that it doesn't make sense is kids get away on bikes against cars or vans or whatever.
That's just how good they are. That was part of the magic too.
Yeah.
In those 80s movies, that was part of the magic, is that these kids on bikes could outrun, like, the government chasing you down in a van with machine guns, and you'd still get away because you knew the shortcut through like Old Man Smith's backyard or whatever.
Or alleyways.
Like, that was all part of the magic.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. They'd go through the narrow openings that a car definitely couldn't travel through. No, you're right with that. Yeah. And they'd have to traverse the whole city in order to make it 2 blocks down to meet the kid, in which there'd be a confrontation in which they would crash the car or something supernatural happens that the car flips and they're able to bike away with no problem unscathed. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But Attack the Block is fantastic. I really like it a lot. Have you seen it, Frank?
I have not. I'm not familiar with this one either.
Okay. I think it's currently streaming somewhere, possibly on Stars right now. I know I just saw it somewhere recently in my streaming browsing looking for something to watch. But it was 2011. It's directed by Joe Cornish, who's a longtime collaborator of Edgar Wright.
Okay.
But this is a directorial outing on his own. Takes place in, at the time, modern day London. It's lower income. It's not like well off people. They're in a kind of
projects of that area.
Yeah. I mean, it's not quite, but yeah, it's definitely like crowded apartment complexes.
Yeah.
They're packed full of people.
Oh yeah.
And there's an alien lands in their park.
Okay.
And these kids beat the crap out of it. Isn't that how it opens?
That's essentially the plot. Yeah. The neighborhood kids, they basically protect their block, literally. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
From whatever this thing is, this creature. And then essentially they're marked because of it, because there's more of them. And now those know what they did. Yeah. And that's what it's about. So it's them trying to protect this building from the rest of these creatures that are now out to get them.
Wow.
And they're just trying to protect themselves and their neighbors, not so much altruistically at first, because they're not the most kind kids.
No, they're jerks. Right? Yeah. Oh my God, they're jerks. Yeah.
That's again, like they are, like, that's another thing you would get in some movies that things have shied away from, is that like these kids aren't the best, but like
they're not the lovable scamps of some of these movies.
No, not indeed.
Not
entirely.
Okay.
No.
But they've got heart and they come around.
Right.
Yes.
The current Doctor Who is in it. Jodie
Whittaker.
Yeah, Jodie Whittaker.
Jodie Whittaker
was in it as a resident in their apartment that gets kind of wrapped up in it with them. It's very good though. I like it quite a bit. But the thing that kind of stands out about that one is that where like Super 8 and Stranger Things become period pieces to kind of set this type of story back in the period that we all know these stories were, like when we saw them the first time, like Super 8 and Stranger Things being in the early to mid 80s. Attack the Block sets it in modern day. So it just takes everything about that genre, that subgenre that we like, but still sets it in modern current day.
Okay.
And that's different. Not everything does that. And I think in the resurgences, it's possibly like a 50-50 split of like what goes back to the 80s and what's in present day. In the case of 2017, it's literally a 50-50 split between the
Right.
80s and modern present day, just because of how they tell that story narratively. But yeah, I did think that's another thing that makes Attack the Block stand out, is that it took all that storytelling, the narrative style from the 80s, but just set it now in our world, like in our current world, which you don't see a lot at the time.
At all.
Ironically, Joe Cornish did it again just a few years ago with The Kid Who Would Be King.
Ah.
Did he really?
Oh, yeah, I remember the ads for that, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same director, again, Joe Cornish, but this time, again, British children, common children, and now they're on a quest to like save the world King Arthur style.
Okay.
With all of the magics from Arthurian legend. But again, like just traveling with their wits, and not bikes this time, but by way of the, I guess, similarly liberating British public transit system.
Okay.
But also in modern current day, if I remember right. I did see it. I did like this one too.
No, that wasn't bad. I saw the trailer. Yeah. I totally forgot about that. I was interested, but it's weird how certain movies just disappear from the radar after they come to being screened or shown.
Right. Yeah, I did see that one in the theater, but like, I mean, I see a lot of movies in the theater because I have the little membership where I just get, 12 free movies, or 12 movies a month as part of it. So I kind of see anything I'm vaguely interested in.
Right.
I'm not like everybody else though.
Yeah.
Not everybody else has that. So I understand. But yeah, even when I saw it in the theater, I was like, after I saw it, it was gone. Like it was gone from consciousness and awareness from everyone else.
Right.
But it is worth checking out. So I do recommend it if it's on cable or something.
I have to look to see where
it's find it.
Yeah, I have to look where it's streaming.
So out of the resurgence of these kids on bikes movies, has anything else jumped out at you all? The modern versions?
Well, for me, something that came up that somebody brought to my attention that I didn't even know exists was Turbo Kid.
I've not seen it. I've heard about it, but I've not seen it.
I need to finish my movies. But Turbo Kid is like a future telling of a kid, but the way they get around to this, it's the future but the year is weirdly 1997, but it's post-apocalyptic in some ways.
Okay, and it came out after 1997?
It came on 2015.
Right, yes.
But for some reason, in this post-apocalyptic world in which there's one kid who's on, who wields the bike, is just, he seems fast. I mean, this thing is campy and corny as all get up.
Okay.
No, I've been meaning to watch it too.
But it's funny. It's a weird throwback to what we see, because it has Michael Ironside as the heavy, and it's
right, of course,
and it's an eye patch, and just tell just controlling people within that. It's stupid fun. You cannot take this seriously. It's that whole apocalyptic thing in which for some reason he is able to be that much powerful because he wields it on a bike. It's just, if you see it, it's just, you can't take it seriously, but it's just straight comedy you can watch while cooking a meal or doing the dishes. Yeah, it's hilarious. But yeah, Turbo Kid.
See, I totally get that about thinking 1997's post-apocalyptic, because like you were saying how hard it was to imagine when you're a kid 4 years in the future.
Yeah.
When we were kids in the 80s, if somebody said 1997, that's like generations away.
Right.
Like you're not comprehending what's going to be there. And like all the movies, everything went bad in the 90s. Like if it made it to the year 2000, it was lucky in fiction at that point in the 80s.
Yes.
But you're looking at like Terminator Judgment Day, and like everything's already happened by the mid 90s in all the fiction. We weren't planning to live that far ahead, apparently, at the end of the Cold War, which I guess makes sense.
Yeah, a lot of concerns about the end of the world. So
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and strange enough, in that movie, that water was king. Oh my gosh, there's so much stuff that's weirdly, it's so weird. It's like, well, how somebody describe it is Sam Raimi and James Cameron did the Mad Max movie with only on $1.25.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's the madness that makes this movie interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about earlier in the show, like what we liked about these things, like what we responded to about all of these stories. But like, I mean, clearly, like we've just talked about the more modern versions, this resurgence that we're getting, and they're going strong. Like people love this stuff now. Do you have any theories about like why audiences, like why it's still resonating with audiences, even like people younger than us, like kids today love this stuff too? Like, do you have any theories of why this stuff's still going so strong?
Well, to me, I feel like the number one word to me is nostalgia, because whenever something of that nature that the parents can relate to, they're going to drag the kids along to show them how they lived their childhood and how much fun it was to be in their age.
Right.
And also, it's a sense of freedom that kids now don't get, as far as that's concerned.
Yeah.
I mean, you really don't get helicopter parenting in those times, you know? It's like,
right.
No. Again, I don't question the reality of it in shows like Stranger Things.
Right.
But there are moments as a parent I go, wow, that kid is so far away from his parent and they have no idea where
None.
where they are.
And
there's no way to contact them. There's nothing.
And then on top of that, to me, it's to them it's like the Stone Ages, because there are no screens. None.
Yes.
Yeah.
And no one's looking for them. Like, you take away video games, cell phones, and it felt more dangerous. You know,
Right.
it's almost like back in the day I used to walk 10 miles to school and 20 miles back, that type of imagery.
Right.
And then
I was saying, like in Stranger Things, they get around some of it by giving them the walkies, and I get it. They want to have some kind of, they didn't want to constantly have like in the script the notation of like, and so and Dustin had to find a payphone, and try to call, what I mean? Which you would have had to done, that was how it would have been in that time.
Yeah.
If you weren't in someone's house or you weren't home, you would have to like search out a payphone and then hope someone would answer, and then, hi, can I please speak to you call Mike's house, and it'd have to be like, hey, Mrs. Wheeler, can I please speak to Mike? And then that's a lot of, that's why they did. I'm sure that's why they did, other than the fact that, kids, use that device and other sort, kids on bike shows.
Yeah.
Or movies.
Right. And they certainly weren't unrealistic at the time.
No.
Like even in some of my friends, we had walkie-talkies. They weren't the good ones. So like from our street to down to the end of the street or next cul-de-sac over, it worked. Beyond that, like we weren't getting much reception. Right. So they definitely have better ones in these shows, but like it was a technology we all kind of dreamed about back then.
Big time.
Being able to use.
Yeah.
I mean, nostalgia you mentioned, I think definitely a big part, because that's what brings us all back to it. I think is a big chunk of it. Not just that, but it's also like an excellent show. Right. So it's not just the nostalgia; it's nostalgia plus quality.
Right.
Is what keeps us coming around. But yeah, I mean, I kind of think back to like the nostalgia and how it runs in 30 or so year cycles, because I think back to when we were kids and you had so much media based in the 50s because that was our parents' heyday. Right. Like that was their idyllic time. That's when Stand By Me was a successful film set in the 50s. That's when Back to the Future was such a successful movie, partially half set in the 50s, 1955. So it was kind of time for that cycle to hit again. So nostalgia definitely is part of it. And yeah, I think it does, like, it shows kids like this kind of like kids today, younger people, because I see the TikToks, and I mean, I know younger people who love Stranger Things. I've seen the tribute videos to like every character has like tons and tons of tribute videos on TikTok now from younger viewers. And so, I mean, yeah, they're definitely connecting with all of it. And yeah, part of it might be like that it looks kind of like a little bit of a fantastical world to them. Where there is all that freedom.
Yeah, tremendously so. But to me, another glaring thing too, that now that you're bringing about the imagery between the 80s and the 50s, is there's a huge technology gap that almost seems impossible to imagine,
Yeah, like the Back to the Future differences of like tab, like what's tab? And, and like it seems kind of quaint compared to this is a cell phone that has like all human knowledge in your pocket compared to that.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely a bigger span.
But I think a lot of it also is, it's in a lot of ways it is, and I was trying to think more about this in my, not to be glib, but I think part of it is Winona Ryder.
Yeah.
I think the fact that she is a hook into the time that we grew up in.
True. True.
When I think back to those days of like, she was in a million things at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and she was, I don't know about anybody else, but obviously a crush for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, for sure.
In that time. So I think that's one of the things where, she had been away and we hadn't really seen her in anything. And I think the idea of her being in something that's along the lines of, again, passing that baton. I mean, granted, she's not in a lot of genre stuff, really, is she?
Right.
I don't think not. I mean, there's not quite. She didn't really have a kids and bikes.
No, I mean, she was in Lucas, which is a sports movie, kids sports movie, sad kids sports movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And she was in like Beetlejuice, a little bit of adventure paranormal.
Right.
And then Heathers, dark comedy.
Definitely Heathers. Yeah.
Dark comedy.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, she's in a bunch of stuff at the time, but not quite exactly like this stuff.
But I thought that, that was one of those like, oh, that's cool. Winona Ryder did something. And then when I found that it was more along like, like the stuff that we grew up on. Because one thing I said about Stranger Things early on to people when I watched the first season with my wife was it borrows from so much stuff that you've seen, but does it in a way that doesn't feel like some stuff that just reshuffles stuff.
Right.
Like, I mean, granted, there are moments that I was like, I'm pointing like, okay, I see where they're coming from, or like, this is like that, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah, they find like new angles in it, or they find the heart and then just like expand the heart of what that moment was to make something kind of like feel fresh out of it.
Yep.
Yeah. And the other thing I was thinking is that just like, I think there's just something that resonates with everybody about these stories of like kids empowerment, of like, kids can change the world, because you're always looking to, the next generation to fix the mistakes.
Right.
Of the previous generation. I think that's just kind of a timeless thing that maybe people do always connect with. That, like these kids are the only ones that can save the day in these things, in Hawkins, in everything, because the adults are, oblivious or just too caught up in their ways,
or in denial.
Don't want to see,
or
exactly,
evil, or
behind
evil.
it.
Yeah.
But I mean. But, when I was thinking about it, again, along with Winona Ryder, I'm like, the show itself, like Beyond the Kids, is pretty populated with, actors that we've, that are either beloved or were in things like, for example, the current season has, we're not going to spoil it. Are we going to tell, I don't know if people know, like there's a fairly big horror icon in it, if you're not aware of it.
Right.
We've had other seasons has had, like Paul Reiser's, like who knew Paul Reiser was going to come back for, I don't know what he's doing.
Right.
But he's another one,
Mikey from Goonies.
Yeah.
Sean Astin. Who was iconic in the 80s.
Yeah.
For these types of roles, Goonies and the Brat Patrol, which I forgot to mention earlier, but was one that I liked a lot.
Matthew Modine was all over stuff.
He was.
He made a bunch of 80s movies too. Isn't Carrie Elways was like the mayor or something, or mayor candidate from one of the seasons?
I think so.
That sounds right.
So again, they've done a pretty good job. Like, it's not like, you're not talking, like, it's not like Tom Cruise rolls into Hawkins, but at the same time,
right.
We have gotten a fair amount of like 80s, characters. You're like, oh, or actors. You're like, oh, I know who this is, right? I remember this, or the nostalgia's there for them, or, but I think that was, like I said, the main thing for me was just the idea of just this, the idea that they're basically trying to show you like I said, the idea of more nostalgia of people that we loved or watched when we were kids too. I think that's why, because a lot of the things that I see for people posting about Stranger Things are, like you said, there's younger people, but there's also people our age and older that love it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, and again, it may just be nostalgia from when they were kids and like we talked about, the freedom that we had and all that. But I also think it didn't hurt the fact that they're, they do a pretty good job of seeding it with other people that we watch too.
Yeah. All right. Then the final thing that I think I want to discuss is, if everybody's finished Stranger Things for now, like, or finishes it soon, the current season, what's something you would recommend that they could watch if they want to, just get into something else that has similar vibes, similar feel, similar kids and bike themes?
The one that really I like, that resurgence of it, is Craigler Creek. For one, the whole creek imagery of where the kids congregate at the creek and just do different things, but it even goes deeper by having each little group have their own little subgenres of kids together, grouped together. And the one that made me laugh out loud is the group called the 10 Speeds, in which all you had to do was have a love of bikes and just act like you're doing so much more than the bike is capable of doing. Like this one kid acts like he can go through something speed. I forgot what it's called, hyper speed or whatever, where he bends the dimensions of time and space in order to go wherever he needs to go based upon using this bike. And then there's one other story called the Ice Pop Trio in season 3 where Craig, God, I can't think of his name, and 2 other people on bikes, and they're able to try to get to this 7-Eleven in order to get this ice pop, but they find out that that one doesn't have it, so they have to create a situation or a space in which he goes, I forgot what it's called, he goes through hyperspace or whatever to get the one across town. But it's just, it has the campiness and imagination of kids on bikes, and it's so nice.
Okay.
It's so nice. Yeah. But I can't recommend that enough. It's on season 3, episode 8. Yeah.
It's currently on Cartoon Network, and is it on HBO Max as well?
It is on HBO Max as well.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's where you can find it.
I love that episode.
I do keep meaning to go back and watch that one too.
Yes. Great cartoon.
Frank, do you have any suggestions? Anything people might like to go revisit or visit?
If you've not read that, I would read before it comes out on, I believe it's Netflix. I would read Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan.
Amazon.
Is it Amazon? Okay. On Amazon.
It is Amazon.
Brian K. Vaughan and Cliff Chang.
Mm-hmm.
Another great kids on bikes. But it's Paper Girls. It's Brian K. Vaughan. Great stuff. Really illustrated nicely. I think it's, if people don't dismiss that in hand as being derivative of Stranger Things, I think they'll really enjoy it. But the comic's great. Comic's a lot of fun. So
yeah, Paper Girls. The comic book is by Image Comics, so you can find it in issues, digital, or trade paperback collections. And yeah, I'm not sure when the show is supposed to hit Amazon. Definitely looking forward to it. Definitely excited about it, and hoping Brian K. Vaughan has some success with an adaptation this time, because shockingly, he hasn't had a lot of success yet with his adaptations, unfortunately.
It's coming on Amazon end of this month.
Oh, is it?
On the 29th.
Is it this soon?
Oh, yeah. Wow. Yeah. Again,
okay, good.
People don't waste time with as soon as they announce it, they push it out quick now.
Yeah, they definitely don't give you much warning on shows these days.
At all.
So for my recommendation, because I did finish Stranger Things at the crack of dawn the other day on a work day, like I said. I'd recommend the 2 Joe Cornish ones I mentioned, Attack the Block and Kid Who Would Be King. Both different, one fantasy, one sci-fi, but I like them both a lot. Both set like kind of modern takes on this, and yeah, those are the ones I would recommend.
Very good.
So, as we always do, we'll post episode notes with links and examples to lots of the stuff we talk about on letmeknowhowitis.com. We'd love to hear from you on Twitter, where you can find us at our show initials at LMKHII. And thank you for listening. Tommy has a joke for us. What is the joke, Tommy?
Okay. The cops came by and said, my dogs were chasing kids on bikes. I replied, I said, that's impossible. My dogs don't have bikes. But I'm bummed. Yeah.
All right. Very good.